today. What is today? Monday, the 27th of September. This morning, Councillor Connacht will open our meeting with Karakia.
Tuia e runga, tuia e raro, tuia te nākau ki patuki tahi, kia kimihia, kia rāpua, te maramatanga, te mohi oranga, te he we maui ora. Bind all that is above before us, bind all that is below after us, bind our collective hearts so they may beat in unison, as we search out, as we seek after enlightenment and clarity, and seize the breath of life.
All right, thank you, Councillor Connacht. Councillors, just a reminder if there are any items on the agenda that for which you have an interest, any declarations of interest, there is only the one item on our agenda today. We have apologies from Councillors Martin and Reid. Councillor Innes is moving that we accept those apologies and Councillor Peters is seconding. Those in favour, aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. As I say, there's one item on our agenda today, the Department of Internal Affairs Three Wars Reform Service Delivery Next Stages. We've got recommendations. I will be moving the recommendations and they are slightly different to what's in the agenda. And fortunately we've got amazing technology and we don't have the recommendations up on our screen. So I probably will go through them just so that anybody who may be watching and can't read the tiny writing will understand what we are doing. So my motion is that the Whangarei District Council 1 confirms its decision of 29 June 2021 to provisionally opt out of reforms. 2, supports the need to lift the standards of water supply quality and wastewater treatment across New Zealand. 3, supports the need for government to genuinely partner with councils. 4, supports the need to introduce an economic regulator to improve efficiency and productivity and ensure there is appropriate oversight. Notes that the economic regulator can apply to council-owned and operated Three Waters infrastructure without amalgamation. 5, notes the need for some councils to achieve greater scale and capability in the delivery of water services and/or alternative funding sources. 6, agrees that there are alternative governance and financial models to that proposed which will achieve most of the government's water reform objectives and outcomes that should receive further consideration by the government. 7, agrees to continue to work with the government to consider these alternative options. 8, agrees that water services entities should have the same accountability mechanisms as provided under the Local Government Act for council-controlled organisations. 9, agrees that ownership of water's assets in the traditional sense should continue to reside with council. 10, agrees that the set-up of any new entity should specify the requirements or principles for consultation as they are set out in the Local Government Act 2002. 11, does not support the government's proposed ownership and governance arrangements for the entities. 12, supports a pause on the reforms until further work has been undertaken to the satisfaction of council. And 13, seeks further engagement and information on the aspects of the water reform proposals. So there are 13 recommended motions that are put forward. Do I have a seconder for those? Councillor Ellis, Deputy Mayor, and this is seconding that. Councillors, today is the day that we have the opportunity to provide our feedback to the government on the proposed Three Waters reforms. We were given an 8-week period from the receipt of the information and the dashboards for us to analyse the information and to provide our feedback to the government. Today is that day. The reason that we've put recommendation number 1 of confirming our decision to provisionally opt out is that we want to make it very clear to our people that that is our position. However, we also agree that all the other points that are made in our proposing our feedback to the government are also relevant. We do all agree that the provision of clean drinking water, good wastewater systems to ensure that our environment is clean, and the provision of stormwater is very important to our country. We also agree that the standards need to be lifted. Probably they need to be lifted to about the Whangarei level of service, because we have done a very good job over the many years providing these infrastructure assets for our people, for and on behalf of our people. We definitely, as part of the recommendation, we are encouraging government to genuinely partner with councils. This is this must be a partnership between local government and central government. We also note that on Thursday it's likely that the Water Services Bill will be passed through Parliament, and that completes the process of setting up the regulator, Taumata Aroa, and brings in, and they will undoubtedly bring in increased levels of service requirements for councils to follow. We have also recommended that, and this is probably the direction that the government will be going, that there needs to be an economic regulator as well. And they'll be looking at ensuring that the provision of these services is equitable and efficient, and that there is good quality services provided to people up and down the country. There are some councils it will benefit looking at other entities because of the greater scale and capability in the delivery of water services and alternative funding sources. In the past, you'll be aware that there were government subsidies. We benefited with our Ruakaka wastewater treatment plant with the subsidy from government, and we think that's a very good way to provide a level of a funding source for communities who literally can't afford to bring their services up to the standard that's required. And in our case, that was a very helpful addition. We also are making it quite clear that there are alternative governance and financial models, and we want those to be explored. It's been said that more than 30 options were looked at, and the option that's been presented was the best option. We actually don't necessarily agree with that. We want them to continue looking at those alternatives. And we would definitely continue to work with government to consider those alternative options. The water services entities, should they be formed, we do also are making the point that our feedback is that they need to have the same accountability mechanisms as council-controlled organisations. So the statements of intent, the governance, the accountability back to the owner of the asset, much as we do with our council-controlled organisations. We're also making the point, our feedback is that the water assets, the ownership of those will continue to reside with councils, the organisations that have built them up over the years. We are also giving feedback that the set-up of any new entities should specify those requirements of the principles of consultation. If the government choose to mandate the process of our council joining with the entities, we must have the opportunity to give our community the chance for their feedback through a long-term plan amendment. We are giving our feedback that we do not support the government's proposed ownership and governance arrangements for the entities, and we would like a pause on reform so that we can continue all of the things that we've given our feedback prior to this. And we actually do want to be involved in the engagement and information on the aspects of the water reform proposals. I'm going to go through one of the reasons why we don't agree with the structures of the proposed new entities. If you look on page 3 of the agenda, there's the diagram of the structure of the new water entities, and you'll see that it's referred to as local ownership with local authorities and mana whenua. And both of those owners appoint and represent people to a regional representative group. So there'll be local authority representatives, mana whenua representatives. That group appoints and monitors an independent selection panel. That panel appoints and monitors the entity board. And the entity board governs the entity which actually manages the assets. So to my mind, there are just so many layers to that, and the people who use the end product are very far removed from that and all of the layers that go into it. I think hopefully the government is hearing that loud and clear, and they're looking at alternatives for the entities should they be formed. We have, you'll see in our agenda papers today the reports that we commissioned to look at, because we are, as governors, we have a duty to ensure that we are doing what's best for the people that we represent, our people. You'll see that we've included reports and attachments to some of our minutes, workshop presentations. We've included the Taituara model report, the local government funding agency assessment letter to the proposed water entities, which was interesting reading, and the LGFA board response to the shareholder council requests on the Three Waters entities. Again, really worth reading. It's on page 111. We commissioned Castalia to give a report, and that's been well recorded, the results of that report, and there's a supplementary which was included in the agenda which gave some more information, which was included from page 151. We also have a report from Rationale looking into the Northland Infrastructure Unit. So we're looking at alternative delivery options that could benefit our region, and there are some financial modelling and comparison to the works data. Rationale also looked at a initial options analysis, which is very detailed, looking at all of the multi-criteria analysis that was valuable for us in our decision making. The options analysis from Rationale is another report that's attached. And the most recent two reports are the PricewaterhouseCoopers report, which is the Whangarei District Council Auckland Northland Three Waters review. Now that is on page 251, and hopefully we've had the opportunity to digest the information that was contained within that. But probably the most important aspect, feedback that I would like to highlight is the fact that in the first 10 years of this proposed 30-year reform, that there's really no indication of significant benefit to our people, and that over a 30-year period there's potential for there to be benefits to the people of our district. I'd like to go back 30 years, 1991. That was the year after the North Auckland Electric Power Board had been sold as a utility. So 30 years ago, there was quite a considerable decision made. And yes, there are people who talk about the North Power entity itself and the way that is a consumer trust and ownership and has benefits. But I would say that if you could predict 30 years ago what the price of electricity would have been, in 1991, I don't think anybody would have been able to accurately forecast the costs of that as a utility. It's very, very difficult to predict 30 years hence. The final report that we've had to inform our decision making today is an SRH report, which is quantifying the value of our water asset revenues. That has relevance because, of course, if the assets are taken off our balance sheet, it impacts on our ability to raise debt, and it also clearly has a significant impact on our revenues. So you'll see that we have all taken into account all of this information, and based on that, we are giving our feedback to the government today, and those are our recommendations. So I will open it up for debate. Councillor Cockerell.
Madam Chair, just ask a question if you don't mind. Question is just in relation to the wording that you've used for number 1. Should that actually be, instead of confirms, reconfirms? And shouldn't it also be opt out of the 3 waters reforms to make it more clarified?
I think confirming our decision of the date is accurate. I don't think that needs any. If we wanted to include the 3 waters reforms in the to make it crystal clear, I think it's pretty clear, but we can go as clean as our water and go crystal clear. 3 waters reforms. Councillor Ernest, are you happy to add those 2 words, the 3 waters reforms in recommendation 1? Thank you. Councillor Peters.
Whangarei District Council has been a good steward of their assets, as the Mayor has said, and I believe it will be a good steward in the future. And you did mention the electricity company, and obviously at that time I wasn't on council, and I strenuously opposed the privatisation of parts of the electricity, and we've been proven right. We haven't taken this step lightly. There have been 35 workshops and reports. We've been discussing this in depth. It's not taken lightly at all. I do think we need to continue to work with government, because that's important for our collective assets, but I want to strongly say that local people need to actually have input and control over local assets.
Thank you, Councillor Peters.
Your Worship,
Councillor Hobbs.
I'd like to move an amendment, please. I'd like to move that Whangarei District be 11, 12 and 13 in our agenda. Whangarei District Council does not support the government's proposed ownership and governance arrangement for the entities. 2, supports a pause in the reforms until further work is undertaken to the satisfaction of council. And 3 will be seek further engagement and information on the aspects of water reform proposals, and reconfirms council's decision of 29th of June 2021 to provisionally opt out of the reforms.
Councillor Benny is seconded.
Okay, Your Worship, my biggest concern is we are the representatives of our ratepayers, and it deeply worries me that our ratepayers outside these doors hardly know anything about what's happening about the water reforms. And I think it's the government's responsibility to make sure they were informed before we got this late in this stage of their reforms for government. So our consultation with our ratepayers has been abysmal. One of the reasons why I wanted to move this amendment is say over a long period of time, and I've been here for a number of years, and the projections are saying over 30 years, in my way, are straight out assumptions. There's no fact around any of the figures they've got, and it's usually based on speculation. And I've been here close to 30 years. So I can look back over 30 years, and for a long period, for 12 years, I was chairman of the Works and Services Department of Council. And councils over a period of time said, we're going to protect the Whangarei District Council with our water and wastewater. With our water, we had the Whangarei Dam, and because of the growth in the Marsden area, we built a new dam down there, the Wilson Dam, and we upgraded that water treatment plant, and we just recently upgraded the water treatment plant at Whangarei District Council in the Whangarei area for the city. All that water space is done with no debt, and we've got reserves in our bank account right now, in our water take, in our reserve account, around about $10 million. On the other side of wastewater, during that period of time, a few councils back, we made a decision to protect our waterways. And when I was chairman of that committee, we put in a sewage system from Lang Beach back to Waipu, upgraded the Waipu treatment plant. We put in a treatment plant at Tutikaka, Awakra. We put a pipeline all the way out to Whangarei Heads and put that all the sewage back into central Whangarei for a bit of treatment and to have a centralised treatment plant. And then we spent 65 million over a couple of years upgrade all the pump stations and in the city. So we've done extremely well and we get no recognition for that. Then we get in a report to say in 30 years' time, Whangarei District as an opt-out entity will not improve over 30 years. I've just pointed out that we've done extremely well over 30 years, and the assumption is we're just going to stop doing things, and we will not be in a better position. Our job as ratepayers, as councillors to our ratepayers, is to make sure we stay up with the game or ahead of the game, which we've done extremely well in this water space. Just think on costs alone. They're saying if we do not join the reform, it's going to cost our ratepayers $4,000 per year in costs for our water and wastewater. And they speculate if we do not reform and keep the cost, if we go with the reform, it's going to cost $1,000. $1,000 in 30 years' time. Well, over the last 30 years, just to give you an example, everything goes up to 3 or 4 times. Our cost to councillors pay, what we get paid, has gone from $14,800 to close to $48,000 the base salary. Over 3.5 times. Our staff costs have gone from just under 8 million to 30 million over 30 years. Our debt has gone from 43 million up to 170 million, 4 times. Income has gone from 42 million up to 160 million. So we're pretty much 4 times everything over the last 30 years. So looking forward, they speculate they can deliver things for $1,000 per ratepayer, but in what I've pointed out, in true reflection, it'll be around about that 3,000 to 4,000, which models the cost that we already said we could do it for. So what benefit do we get? We give away local ownership, we give away our asset base, we give away our balance sheet, and it takes away our borrowing capacity, and it reduces our credit rating. Now we should be fighting hard for our ratepayers to retain those. Should be fighting extremely hard to retain those. Because we are an outlying council, we're up here doing things relatively well, and we've got some councils that need help. And it certainly makes sense if the government lifted those up to meet the top performing councils. So I cannot support us going out on a wide spectrum of what we want the government to do. Supports the need for government to generally partner with councils. They should be doing that anyway. It's their role. They should be doing that. And I think the original motion is too long and it misses the key points. So thank you.
Councillor House. Councillor Deeming.
Thank you, Worship. It's a pleasure to be able to stand and talk this and take the mask off anyway. Thank you. I totally support the 3 points that, 4 points was it, that Councillor Hoss has brought forward. However, I think we also need the other points that are in the main recommendation. The government's efforts to discuss with the community is a patronising ad aimed at 6-year-olds. It's an advertisement. It's not information or consultation. We need to be right in the game. We need to be at the table to continue our discussion with the government on behalf of our community. I mean, I'd love to bang the table and say, opt out, that's it, we're out of here. But I don't believe we can. Well, we can't at this point anyway, because today is not about opting in or opting out. But that is certainly what the myriad of emails that are crossing my desk every day are saying from the community. They are all, I have not had one single email, contact, phone saying you should be opting in. every single one has been quite determinedly saying opt out, and we don't care about the consequences, we don't care if it costs us more, we want to have local people running our local assets. We do not want this being run from Auckland, Wellington or wherever else this entity, which we have no information on, may come from. In my view, our need to emphasise our opt-out position while staying at the table and within the discussion is to ensure that our people and their assets are protected in the manner that our community wants, and as they are very clearly telling us. The reports commissioned to review the government's WICS report do not provide any confidence in that report. The figures provided could be described as aspirational at best. Realism and substance are sadly lacking. This is a sad reflection on the claim to be informing our community and providing benefits. Accordingly, while I do support the amendment, I will be voting for, if it comes as a substantive motion, I will be voting for the original motion to ensure that we are covering all of the points that we need to.
Thank you, Councillor Deeming. Councillor Innes.
I agree with you, Councillor Deming, getting the mask off. Thank you, Your Worship. I don't support the amendment. I see that this is a time for information. I see that Whangarei is very much an outlier. We stand apart from others, and I just pick up on Councillor Holz's comments, which the first part of it I support, in the fact that even as you as Chair, Councillor Holz, in terms of infrastructure, have actually provided good stewardship in terms of our resources, and that is in terms of providing for good asset management, no debt in terms of our water services, in terms of fresh water and wastewater, and that stands us apart. So with that, really, we need to have our eyes wide open, because we are an outlier. We know that when we look at the country in terms of the national interest, there are serious concerns in terms of the three waters. So I see that going forward, it's really one for discussion. We clearly state in that discussion it relates to ownership and governance. They are key aspects, and it's one that, although we're an outlier, there's a lot of other local government units also stating that. And Local Government New Zealand has been in a position where it's gone around, it's actually provided a forum for discussion, and part of that now is we're putting this through. We are saying that these two aspects are crucially important, that we need to consider in terms of local democracy and localism, which Local Government New Zealand supports. I see that going forward, we mentioned that there needs to be time to consider. Well, it's not in terms of just looking at the water reform, it's also in terms of the RMA and also the review of local government that's currently being undertaken at the moment. It just needs to have a look at all three aspects so that we know that when we're going forward we don't lose local democracy, which I think is a key aspect. So unfortunately, Councillor Holz, I do, and Councillor Benny, seconder, I do not support the amendment. Thank you.
Councillor Innes. Councillor Cockerell, then Cooper.
And Chair, I have another question, if you don't mind, a couple of questions actually. One of the questions is relating to your item 3, which is supports the need for government to generally partner with councils. At this present moment, do you feel that the government has actually generally partnered with this council?
The recommendation is that we support the need for government to genuinely partner.
Madam Chair, was there not an offer made by Internal Affairs to pay for reports that this council was prepared to write or have written?
My understanding is that through Local Government New Zealand there is a fund from the Department of Internal Affairs to support councils in their analysis of the analysis. And we made a request, but that was declined.
So it was declined even though we were asked, were you given any reasons why it was declined?
Not that I'm aware of.
Nothing in writing. Okay, so when you ask for a government to generally partner with councils, what do you mean by that? If it's not funding?
Councillor Cockerill, genuine partnership doesn't necessarily mean money.
Okay. How much did these reports cost the council?
Simon, do you have
I have the same problem. It's okay, Simon.
That could really is directed towards the custodian report. That was probably something in the order of about $25,000.
Okay. With that being in mind, has the Internal Affairs paid other councils for their reports?
I don't know if that's a question that we can answer, Councillor Cockerill.
Madam Chair, I'm just trying to ascertain to what support we've actually received from central government in relation to our stance on provisionally opting out. So I'm trying to understand what support they've actually given us, apart from a blatant ad, which has not been supported at all, and no financial support. So has there been any other support that they've actually given us, apart from refusing to give us information?
I think if you look at the number of webinars, information that we received from LGNZ and DIA themselves, I think you'll recognise that there has been considerable amount of information provided to us, to every council.
I'll come back to some more questions.
Councillor Cooper.
Thank you, Your Worship. I guess it's I guess I'd like to pick up firstly Councillor Hoss and the history that he gave us, which is no one can deny that this council has done very well. And I would also say that for someone who spent nearly 30 years in this chamber, Councillor Hoss still looks reasonably fresh. However, I guess we can't also deny that the rest of this country, or a lot of the rest of this country, a lot of the other councils in this country have problems, and the government is trying to address those problems. Now, have they done it well? I think we all agree that at times the structure that they've put forward we don't agree with, and I'm fully on board with that. But as Councillor Innes said, this is a time for information, not for grandstanding or sort of emotional rhetoric. And if we look at the history of Whangarei, there were people within, I think it was around 2008, marching down the street because they weren't happy with the way the council had been running its waters. And I guess that's the real point, isn't it? What those people did was there was a problem, they weren't happy with the authority that was running their water, and they had the ability to make a real impact on that authority by marching down the street and stopping outside the door of the council. And that is the worry as we go forward, is that we lose that ability. And I guess as we look to the future, we should take into account the formation of the Tamata Arawai outfit, regulatory body. So yes, in our submission, in our agenda, we have the recommendations, and we support a regulatory body, which is a good idea, and I support that too. But the government soon, in its water bill coming up, is going to introduce another regulatory body which focuses on quality, which in the past we haven't really had. It's been there, but they've never done anything. No convictions, despite the fact that people have even died. So that is going to make a material difference as we go forward, and we need to be cognizant of that as a council. There will be extra costs on our water, no matter who is running the system. What we would like to see, and what I would like to see, is that the council has an input into that system, that the good work of the previous people that have gone before in this chamber is recognised, and that we are very clear on how we stand financially as a council once those assets are lost from our books. What will that effect be? Will we get compensation for the fact that in this district, the people right here and now have paid for what they've got, and in fact they've really paid forward for future generations, you could argue. They've really set them on a good foundation. And so we need to ensure that as we go forward, that is recognised. But I don't think we should throw the baby out with the bathwater. We have to recognise the government's got a job to do. Yes, the advertisements that Councillor Cockerillo referred to were most unfortunate in my opinion. However, as Councillor Hulse has said, our job is to sort through the chaff and get to the meat of the matter and make informed decisions. And I, therefore, while I agree with the points that Councillor Hulse has made, I will support the original motion. Thank you.
Councillor Cutforth.
Thank you, Your Worship. One of the interesting things I think about this whole issue has been how it's brought this council and various views on this council together, because we've always had quite a, dare I say, diverse range of views around the table. That would be one way of saying it. But with this particular issue, I think we've seen complete agreement around the table, regardless of people's political views or viewpoints or ideas or views on other issues. Everybody has been quite supportive of the approach that we've taken. And while I understand the sentiments behind Councillor Hulse's amendment, and I'm interested in his history, prehistory possibly, I do think that we need to, I'll be supporting the original motion. Part of that is because I think it demonstrates that we're taking a very constructive approach to this issue, and we're taking a very comprehensive approach. And I think you can see through the however many pages there are on the agenda that that's been the approach that we've taken the whole way through, in terms of looking at the government information, looking at reports from other independent consultants, looking at other models. And I do have to say that I have some real interest in the model, the Northland Infrastructure Unit type model, similarly to the model we're using with the Transportation Alliance at the moment. I think there is certainly scope for us to look at that. And I was interested also in what Councillor Hulse had to say about the approach that government had taken in the past in terms of a subsidy to assist with major water infrastructure, similar to the approach they take with Waka Kotahi or NZTA in terms of a transport subsidy. And again, I was like, well, why have they not looked at that type of model for, particularly for what we are, an outlier, who are now risking being penalised for the success and penalised for the work that we've done. I guess the only possible good thing, if in fact this whole thing is mandated, is that the increased level of service that will be expected, we actually might be able to meet without the difficulties that some councils will have. I also want to really just put on public record my complete distaste for the water ads, which I think were utterly patronising for both councils and those who are dealing with the complexities of it, but also for the general public. Dumbing down doesn't really assist the public to understand what the issues are. And just a point on the governance and ownership model, and Your Worship, I think you explained it really clearly in terms of the layers and layers between the local users who will be completely alienated, and even the almost lack of complete control from their representatives in terms of councils. So I'm very supportive of the approach that we're taking. I think it is really constructive, I think it is really comprehensive, and so I'll be supporting the original amendment. I just wanted to make a bit of a quick comment too on Global Government New Zealand. While I accept that they have to support the views of the majority of councils, and I do understand the majority of councils are unlike us and not outliers, I think they also should represent the views of all of us, and I would have liked to have seen the LGNZ at least supporting Whangarei District in having a different view because of the work that we've done in the past and our ratepayers are paid for, and really supported us to have that position. Thank you.
Councillor Benny?
Thank you. I was happy to second Councillor Holz's amendment, particularly for a couple of reasons. One is I agree with the general sentiment of the initial recommendation, but I think it's too wishy-washy and too soft. Item 3 supports the need for government to genuinely partner with councils, and number 7 agrees to continue to work with the government to consider these alternative options. Assumes that we are already in meaningful negotiations and meaningful working with them, and from what I can gather, that is not the case. And I would hope that moving forward that there is genuine partnership and working with the government to consider this, especially for Whangarei District Council. The talk about mandating, that I think the general talk is that this will probably be mandated. That is not a genuine partnership with councils. That is not working with the government to consider these ownership options. So while it's a great sentiment, I am happy to support the general sentiment of their original recommendation. But I think Councillor Holz is right. This is about making a stand and sticking with it. I'm not confident that the majority of our public out there are informed as they should be. I believe we should be informing them more of the repercussions of what could happen with this. And the Castalia report is a really good base document for us to go out to the public further. And I believe that asking for a pause in the reform is just, it has to happen. So yeah, I'm supportive of Councillor Holston's amendment for that reason.
Councillor Benny? Councillor Golightly?
Thank you, Worship. I'm with Councillor Holst on this one. I also think that we need to be assertive, precise and strong, and that is one thing that Councillor Holst has always been, in my opinion. These are our assets for our ratepayers, and we need to be strong in our leadership and show that to central government. I sort of feel like some of these recommendations here, they aren't strong enough. They don't sort of firmly, to me, stamp the decision of what we feel around this table. And if nothing else, for our distaste and the doubling down of the ad campaign around the 3 weeks. So I will be supporting Councillor Holson's amendment.
Councillor Bernardi. Councillor Kokoro.
I'll speak if that's okay, rather than just making out more questions. I seem to be not getting much answer with the questions that I'm asking, so I'll Councillors, the motion that's been put as the amendment is an interesting one. And Councillor Benny has highlighted already about the sentiments that the previous motion was actually putting up and how it was highlighting on some aspects which many of us have got concerns over. You know, such as how has the partnership truly been working up to today? How has this government actually been looking out for the best interests of Whangarei's residents? One of the interesting things I've been involved with over the last few months is with the Hui Waiata Māori Committee. And one of the interesting things they have there, they made very clear submissions saying, we want our say of our water. So this is locals making it very, very clear that they want say over their water. And at the present moment, that's not what the government's even considering or even consulting with. And this is with one Māori committee. The National and the ACT Party both are coming out asking for this to be put on hold. Both are coming out over the weekend. And with even previous Prime Minister Sir John Key referring to this government working on a fair mentality of trying to keep their communities together. So it concerns me, councillors, and that's why I am supportive of Councillor Hols's motion. I'd actually even probably go further than that. In my view, I wouldn't provisionally opt out, I would opt out. This is a government which doesn't understand its people, when it cannot even determine the difference between ratepayers and taxpayers. As the ratepayers are own these assets, not the taxpayers, the ratepayers. They've paid the money. And we highlighted on debt before. You know, we'd have to pay back $36 million of reserves if this to leave our assets. And then on top of that, we'd have to pay back the development contributions which people have paid for those assets to be developed. So we're seriously putting our council and our ratepayers in further debt. How is that responsible? And Councillor Cutforth has highlighted on quite truthfully that all of the councillors in here are in favour of standing up to the government in various forms, in various ways, about this three waters. However, I don't believe we're actually saying it strong enough to the government. And I don't believe they have truly actually been working with us. Because at this present moment, I'm not seeing it. I'm seeing an ad, I'm seeing gestures of bribes, and that's how I see the money. For a $1.4 billion asset, I can't understand why you'd offer peanuts. Also on top of that, councillors, we are seeing presently so much of our district, our Northland district, being pulled down to Auckland. You know, we just have to look at the health reforms. Locals get no say in that now, because the people who are going to be there are all going to be appointed. So your local democracy is gone. State highways, all controlled from Auckland or Wellington. So when there's budget cuts, guess which region gets cut first? So with a possible amalgamation, and this is why I go further forward here, and I turn around and say, I'm in favour of opting out altogether, because I just am not seeing the evidence or benefit to our people. And I do refer to our people. Both Māori, both non-Māori, around Whangarei and Northland. I'm sick and tired of seeing things taken away from our people and going to another area where the benefit does not come back here. So while I appreciate what Councillor Holmes has said, I have to support it at this present moment because I cannot, I believe we need to be stronger with this government.
Councillor Murphy.
Can I just ask a question with the book? So Councillor Holmes is proposing that we just go with 11, 12 and 13. Number 10 is really important to me, which it states agrees that the setup of the new entities should specify the requirements and principles for consultation. So have the DIA indicated that will be part of that requirements and principles for consultation will already be included in or under one of the new entities' responsibilities? I assume so.
Through you, Madam Chair. Not as such. They are faced with a difficulty, and if we go through a consultative process and the community says no, what do they do at that point? So they have talked about mechanisms, but what those mechanisms are, I'm not sure.
So sorry, just for clarity, I'm confused. Is this about consultation on this reform process, or is this the fact that once if the entities are established, that they will have to consult with communities about projects going forward? Am I confused? Which one is it?
This is about item 10.
Yeah.
Is with the setup of a new entity, we need to ensure that the requirements and principles of consultation as set out in the Local Government Act, that we as an organisation will, that's my understanding of it, is that we will consult in accordance with the Local Government Act.
Okay. I was actually thinking a step ahead. I was thinking, will these new entities be required to consult with their communities, in the future? Because when, sorry, now my question is turning into more of I'm speaking now, because I really agree with what Councillor Cooper was saying. So that's why I'm not sure whether I will support Councillor Holz's amendment, because I think number 10 is really important, but it sounds as if I was wrong anyway. Yeah, okay. So that is consultation in setting up of the entity. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Connell.
This has been a very, very, very interesting first term of council. This is such a huge thing. There's so many little facets within everything, and I do not disagree nor agree with many of the statements that already have been passed around. Keeping the locality is definitely a necessity to make sure that we are looking after our residents and ratepayers and those people of Whangarei. Making sure that the costs do not get put too much onto people that do not require the assets per se, let's say, until they actually need them. One of the things that was highlighted with me in one of the papers was the fact that if we went to, I think, with the North Island one, we'd have to go over everybody as opposed to just those people who would be actually using the infrastructure. The thing is, as well, this is to do with the infrastructure of the three waters as opposed to just the water. It is to cover off those spaces and how we actually get the infrastructure put through. I also agree that there are those out there that have not been able to do as well as we have. Within what I think it was about 90% of councils will be better off than we will be. But we're up to such a high standard as it is that, well, sometimes you can take a hit to actually bring friends and family from around the country up to the standard of living that we actually have ourselves. Yes, I can drink fresh water, stuff you to somebody else. No. My brother lives in Auckland. I've got friends and family up in far north and whatnot. I wouldn't want to put them into a worse off situation that either they have to pay a hell of a lot more or have to be stuck with terrible infrastructure. I don't fully agree with the way it's all been going. I don't fully agree with all of the ways, but I also see the need to be able to look after everyone else. We've already, in the last, I think it was 2020, the drought, we were able to look after Far North District Council and Whangarei, I believe, with taking the water from our dams to support them. We've already been helping them from the fact that we've been able to be more out. So the fact if we could, that was a cost to us as well. So if we had ability to help them out, let alone Auckland, they would be able to then raise their system so we wouldn't have to help them out, but we'd be on a level playing field, just as many of the other councils would be as well. Yeah, we've done extremely well, but we're up on our high horse right now saying, yes, we're doing really well, but it doesn't take too much of a knock to find out about a few spills that have happened, a few things that have closed off a beach or whatnot. And we're not perfect. We have issues that we need dealing with, and we have done exceedingly well, but we do need to take into account that we're not perfect. Central government does need to do a hell of a lot better. The propaganda that was put out as that advertisement, as other people have already stated, the giant eyes, look at me, it's all good. I looked at it and I thought, is that central government being the frog, taking the dragonfly into itself? It's like, that's very questionable. It's like, but there are ways that could have been done much better, but at least they've tried, but it really needs a lot of work on it. One of the biggest issues I have with it as well is just to ensure there is the Maori voice within it as well. Whilst Councillor Coccarella brings up that locality of the Maori that the group that he's spoken with, a couple of the emails I've received and some of the statements I've seen of some people, people are calling their unaccountable iwi corporations, and why are iwi being given the power to control our water? No, it's giving them more rights over the taonga that was already promised to them to support. It is the infrastructure on the contamination that we are having within the areas. It is making sure that there are lost the word, the stuff that goes out from our treatment plants is able to be as fresh as possible. Whilst we do have high standards, we know that there are going to be standards that will be coming up, which will be a lot more as well. So ensuring that our discharge, thank you. The discharges into the waterways are fresh enough so that we can go fishing, eat the fish without having to worry about any other issues from it. And one of the things that I've always kind of thought about is when you find yourself doing really well, rather than building a fence, you build a longer table to support those around you. That's my stance on things. Now, I'm not fully supportive nor fully against this, but I do see the need to ensure that our team of 5 million or whatever it is looked after as well as we are able to do ourselves, because there are less fortunate out there in councils with much smaller people that are not able to get the infrastructure that we are able to do. So I'm not supportive of the modification. I'd rather go with the original one with the provisional opt-out, as we've already stated, just confirming. We may be mandated into this, I do not know. We'll soon see, but I'd rather be able to look after friends and family that we have around the place, that who have come from here, who live here as well, than just say stuff in, because it's, yeah. But we need to do better. We need to, there's a lot of information to digest, but we do need to get central government to do a lot better to work with everyone.
Councillor Thomas. No further discussion on the amendment. I should take my right of reply now in case the amendment was successful. The amendment, of course, is no different to the items that already have been moved. There's no change. There's no so it's really reinforcing that. So if the amendment is passed, it's exactly the same items that were in the original motion. The reason why I won't support the amendment is, as has been pointed out, there are aspects of the original motion that augment, that strengthen, that enhance, that are constructive in our feedback to government. This is our opportunity to provide that feedback to government. They want to hear what it is. And as Councillor Cronk has suggested, we have neighbours who possibly could benefit from the formation of an entity. It doesn't need us to be part of it. But there are other councils up and down the Motu who would benefit and are keen on the reform package. But this is our chance to give our feedback from Whangarei District Council perspective on what we see as the reforms. And I agree that we make it quite clear that for us we are still not wanting to be part of an entity as proposed. But we do also want to ensure that the models that are looked at, we want them the government to keep looking at options, to keep investigating, to look at alternative governance and financial models. It's important, I think, that we do provide that feedback instead of just truncating it and say we don't like it. So that, which is why I believe the original motion includes all of the points that was made in the amendment, because they were included in the original motion. So I will put the amendment.
Division, please.
Councillor Holmes has called for a division. Those in favour of the amendment, please raise your hand and hold them up, because I notice that some people go up and down.
Councillors Benny, Golightly, Holmes and Cockerill.
Those against?
Councillors Murphy, Connor, Upworth, Peters, Cooper, Innes, Deeming and Her Worship the Mayor.
The amendment is lost. I will put the motion, given that I have had my right of reply. Those in favour, actually I will call for a division. Those in favour, please raise your hands.
Councillors Benny, Murphy,
That's unanimous. Fantastic. Thank you everybody for your feedback that we're going to now provide to the government on the Free Waters reforms proposals. There are no other items on the agenda, so I will close the meeting. Thank you everybody, and thanks to our members of the media and our comms and our staff. Thank you very much.